Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's 6 p.m. Cairo local time. Time to have our news bulletin from Channel 2, and here are the main headlines. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi arrives in France to participate in the G7 summit upon an invitation from his French counterpart. Leaders of the G7 nations arrives in France to participate in the G7 summit overshadowed by global disputes. And Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli reiterates the importance of finalized projects in the new Alamein city by next June. Welcome back. The details. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi arrived this morning in Biarritz, France, to participate in the G7 summit upon an invitation from his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the G7 summit will be overshadowed by many topics, on top of which are security, combating terrorism, fighting human trafficking and illegal migration, fighting inequality, in addition to supporting women empowerment. Climate change, financial, economic challenges are also going to be on top of the agendas. Radi added that President El-Sisi and the head of the African Union will deliver a speech at the G7 and Africa Partnership Summit to present Africa's vision towards achieving security, stability, and sustainable development, and also means to combat inequality. The head of state will also have a number of meetings with world leaders to review bilateral ties, issues of mutual concern, regional and international developments. The 450th annual G7 summit kicks off on August 24th, and it's going to last for 3 days in the seaside resort of Biarritz, France. For 2 days, leaders from the US, Canada, UK, France, Italy, Germany and Japan, as well as EU top officials, will discuss global challenges involving foreign policy, economic issues, the protection of the environment, and Egypt participates for the very first time in the 45th group of G7 summit, coming in the light of its chairmanship of the African Union.
A group of 7 summit to be held this weekend in France will likely end without a joint communique due to gaps between member nations on trade. It would be the first time a G7 summit ends without a communique since meetings began in 1975, underscoring the rift of US President Donald Trump's America First trade policies has created among the G7 advanced economies. A raft of unprecedented measures are set to transform the glamorous French resort of Biarritz into a security fortress as it gears up to host G7 leaders this weekend. For the August 24 to 26 summit, sun and wave worshippers will have to look elsewhere as the entire central area will be shut down to host high profiles such as Donald Trump, Boris Johnson and Angela Merkel. Activists have announced a counter-summit of thousands of people to lambast the policies of world powers, and the French authorities want to avoid violence at all costs. Annual group of 7 summits brings together the leaders of Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States. French President Emmanuel Macron wants the G7 to talk about tackling global inequality. Nowhere is this clearer than climate change, a major factor, according to France, in driving economic and social inequality. G7 leaders, especially Germany's Angela Merkel, can also expect pressure over financial contributions to NATO, the bedrock of transatlantic security that Trump says relies too heavily on U.S. largesse. And the six partners will struggle to get flexibility from Trump on other continuous points: Washington's posture against Iran and the roller coaster trade war with China that is contributing to a possible global economic recession. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is eager for U.S. support as he pushes Britain through what could be a perilous no-deal Brexit. Trump has dangled the prospect of a big bilateral trade agreement, and the White House will continue using that as a bait to try and force Britain into shutting down Chinese companies. Brexit and trade were among the topics discussed by the two leaders in a Monday phone call, during which Trump expressed great enthusiasm for meeting Johnson. Finding common ground between allies has become increasingly tough at the annual summit, with the United States an outlier in its approach to handling disputes over trade and the environment.
And on the sidelines of the G7 meetings, a French-Egyptian summit is going to take place between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron to discuss a number of issues of mutual concern, as well as ways to boost bilateral ties. To have more details on the historic ties that bond Egypt and France, let's have a quick look.
Egypt and France have witnessed distinguished relations at all levels since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took office to achieve the aspirations of the two nations. The two countries have strong diplomatic ties based on continuous consultations and coordination towards several issues of mutual concern. On October 24, 2017, President al-Sisi paid a three-day visit to Paris, during which he met his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and other senior officials. The president's visit to Paris was his third since taking office and the first visit to the Élysée Palace since Macron took office. The two leaders had discussed the means of fostering bilateral ties in the cultural and education fields. On January 28, 2019, President el-Sisi and his wife had received French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife at Cairo's Ittihadiyya Presidential Palace and started a closed session of talks. The French head of state began a three-day trip to Egypt with the first stop at Aswan, where he visited Abu Simbel Temple. Macron's visit coincided with the start of France-Egypt 2019, which was launched earlier this year by el-Sisi and his French counterpart to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the opening of the Suez Canal. El-Sisi and Macron also witnessed the signing of a number of agreements between the two countries to develop education, social protection, health, transportation, foreign affairs, trade, culture, and youth issues in Egypt. This was Macron's first official visit to Egypt since assuming office in 2017. Meanwhile, on 21st of January 2019, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with French Minister of Economy and Finance Bruno Le Maire in Cairo over economic ties and bilateral relations. The meeting tackled the maximum cooperation in the sectors of health, renewable energy, transportation, and logistics. Both countries are showing understanding regarding the situation in Libya, as President el-Sisi stressed to his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in recent phone call his rejection to all forms of foreign interference in Libya's internal affairs. El-Sisi and Macron backed the UN's call for a ceasefire in the war-torn country and to resume negotiations between the conflicting sides. France always stressed the appreciation of the Egyptian president's leadership, which has guided Egypt from difficult times to its current state of stability.
Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli reiterated the importance of finalizing the new projects that have been established in the new Alamein city by the 30th of June. The Prime Minister's remarks were made during his meeting with the chairman and the top representatives of companies working in the new Alamein projects to review achievements in these projects as well as the details of other ones. The Premier also held another meeting with the Minister of Housing, Dr. Asim Al-Gazzar, to review the achievements in the project of the fourth generation cities as well as developments in the sanitary drainage project. To some regional news, where a missile hit the car park of Libya's Metega airport in Tripoli today, forcing flights to be grounded for almost 3 hours before operations resumed. Libyan security officials said Metega airport was exposed to a missile coinciding with the arrival of 2 flights. Metega airport has been repeatedly hit since Libyan forces launched an offensive to take the Libyan capitals from terrorist groups and armed militias. A car bomb exploded in the opposition-held Syrian city of Idlib today as airstrikes hit its outskirts within the Syrian government campaign to recapture the last major opposition bastion. Security forces said the blast took place in Al-Qusur neighborhood and killed 1 and wounded some others. Meanwhile, the Syrian forces massed in northwest Syria in a bid to push further north after overrunning a key town and surrounded a Turkish army outpost. To Jordan. Jordan's state news agency said that an identified gunman opened fire on a bus near the country's ancient city of Petra, an important tourist destination. Security officials said no passengers were on board, but the bus was damaged by the gunfire, adding that no group claimed the responsibility of the attack. To Yemen, where the southern separatists declared a ceasefire in their clashes with government forces in the oil-producing province of Shabwa after 2 days of fighting. The Southern Traditional Council, or the STC, has called upon all parties in the Shabwa governorate to exercise restraint and abide by the ceasefire called for by the Arab coalition. The council also called on its forces to remain in their positions and maintain control over the institutions and property they overlook. However, it warned against any attacks on the Arab coalition forces. To some business news, Weather Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics said that Egyptian exports to G7 countries increased to reach $3.8 billion during the first half of the current fiscal year, to reach $3.8 billion, and compared to $3.5 billion the same period a year earlier, up nearly 9%. The Compass added that the United States of America came on top of the countries importing Egyptian commodities with nearly $1 billion. Italy came second and the United Kingdom came third. The agency also noted that Egyptian imports from the G7 countries also increased in 2019 to reach $8.7 billion, up 2% compared to 2018. The Lebanese government has vowed to make urgent progress on reforms to help overcome a worsening economic crisis that prompted Fitch Ratings to cut the country's credit rating. Speaking after Fitch downgraded the sovereign to CCC on debt servicing concerns, Lebanese President Michel Aoun said the current crisis had been brewing for many years, but everyone was now working to tackle the causes. S&P Global, which affirmed Lebanon's credit rating at B- to B, with a negative outlook, said it considered Lebanon's foreign exchange reserve sufficient to service government debt in the near term. To the U.S.-China issue, China today angrily hit out the latest U.S. tariff hikes on its goods, strongly urging the U.S. side not to misjudge the situation and immediately stop its mistaken actions, according to their remarks. The remarks came one day after Donald Trump increased existing and planned tariffs on a total of $550 billion in Chinese goods in response to new tit-for-tat levy hikes announced earlier that day by Beijing on $75 billion of U.S. imports. Earlier, European leaders have warned Trump of the dangers of trade skirmishes with China and Europe, saying that Trump's escalating trade tensions could force economies around the world into recession.